What is up, large data bankers? Welcome back to the stream. Happy Friday. It's good to see all of you. It's gotten pretty sunny, gotten pretty warm here in New York City. I don't think you're allowed to say hello from sunny New York City, but it is kind of how I feel. I went outside at my deck a few hours ago, and my feet were just getting warmed. The sun-warmed wood of the sun-warmed deck was keeping my feet nice and warm. So that was pretty cool. Pretty cool. But anyway, it's been a pretty good week. You know, last week I was actually on vacation. You might have seen I didn't stream. And that's because I was skiing in Utah. I went to what do you call it? Park City in Utah, which is kind of a pretty good ski resort next to Salt Lake City. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. But it's on Epic Pass, a key component of any ski vacation for me, since I did buy that Epic Pass last year. Pretty good deal. If you're into skiing, you know, it's something like $700 and you get unlimited lift tickets at all of the participating places, and they're really all over the place. You got your Colorado, your Utah, your California, your Idaho, you know, you got your New York, and they've even got some in Canada and Japan, and probably other places. Now, the problem with Epic Pass, if you're a big ski person, you might know, there's a controversy because they basically don't pay their workers enough. And so I do feel like I'm kind of enabling an evil corporation, which it is sort of sad. But at the same time, I just love skiing, so I can't help myself, you know? It's tough. How do you be... There is no ethical consumption under capitalism. I think that's what this comes down to, right? Yeah. But anyway, that's kind of what's up. That is kind of what's up. You know, just got back last week. Been doing some work stuff, this, that, the other, planning things. And looking forward to get back into the programmer's seat today. Do a little bit of Go stuff, do a little bit of database stuff. Try to see what we get up to. Should be fun. Hope you all are doing well, by the way. Hello to Lithium, Project, Cyanide, and Travua. It's good to see all you. Good to see all of you. What's new in your world is a question. Is anybody doing anything cool? Any projects? Any exciting life news? You know. What is up? What is up? I think what I'm going to do today, probably do a little bit more. So let's see. What is our status? What is our status? We did some good stuff. We got a few of our old long-standing projects merged over the last couple of weeks, which is cool. So all that cursor stuff is totally done. If you remember, we were working on various cursor things, implementing SQL cursors, implementing the move statement. There's all sorts of problems, but we did that. It's all done. I'm pretty psyched about it, honestly. I feel like that's a pretty good accomplishment for the stream. Especially because, you know, we really just worked it on Fridays. So that's pretty sweet. I feel good about it. And yeah, there's a few other like random things that I've got going on. A couple of like testing tools that I've been working on. Prepared, kind of more automated testing of prepared statements is something that I was working on the stream maybe three weeks ago that I think we're gonna pick up today. Maybe try to finish up this explain opt steps that we were working on a couple weeks ago as well. And yeah, maybe random projects will kind of follow our nose and see what's up, but it's kind of the plan. Sound good? Nice day in the UK, that's good. I feel like it's kind of rare that the UK weather and the US weather are the same. Your country, the war. That is a problem. Are you Russian, Ukrainian? I hope you're okay. It's very awful. I hope it stops. Very disturbing stuff. Don't even know really what to say about it, but I hope you're doing okay and your friends and family as well. I am not streaming from the office, no. I think the office, that's right, I did go into the office this week. That was cool. See some coworkers, which was nice. It was a little overwhelming, not gonna lie. I've definitely gotten used to my highly optimized streaming and working cave over the last 2 years, and going into an open plan office with a lot of people in it was, you know, a bit of a weird situation, I would say. Wow, you're in Ukraine. Dang. Well, I hope you're staying safe, man. I assume since you're chatting on Twitch, you're probably somewhere that isn't getting actively bombed, but I certainly hope that you are doing okay along with your family and friends. Although maybe that's too much to ask. I don't know. It's crazy. Did you guys see that really weird and horrible thing with like somebody who maintains like a popular Node.js package or something, like updated it to automatically delete files from people who like live in Russia or something like that? And which also, first of all, like the worst kind of activism, right? It's like that's not going to effectively do anything for anybody. And then it turns out that they actually this package got updated on some like human rights humanitarian like consortium that was like collecting information from Ukrainian soldiers on like human rights violations and stuff like that, and essentially it just like deleted all of their files forever without. So basically, like this person who was kind of trying to do a good thing for the world seems to have done like an extremely horrible thing for the world. So that's, I guess, just a don't be a ineffective keyboard warrior, I guess. I'm gonna send you a link to the tweet here because I think it's like super freaking weird, man.
And write to disk.
Yeah, stay strong, Trava. I agree with Cyanide. What is up, Metal Matza? It's good to see you. I've been pretty good. I hope you've been good too. And Crows, thank you so much for the 2 months. I appreciate it. Welcome back. Welcome back. Okay, we've gone into a dark place for sure. Definitely gone into a dark place. Sometimes there's dark things in the world, though, so I think it just sort of happens. Sometimes you go into a dark place. Never left. That is awesome. All right, so let's I'm gonna go ahead and switch our focus into the world of programming stuff. So I want to quickly talk about some things. So basically, let's see. I want to get this one done. So basically, what's happening here? I mentioned we pretty much finished the cursor related stuff, and we did mostly finish it. But there was a little bit of I guess like a bug or a missing thing that I needed to fix before we ship our latest release, which is basically in Postgres, there's something called a portal. And a portal is it's kind of like a wire protocol level cursor, more or less. Like you can say to the wire protocol, hey, I would like to prepare a query, and then I would like to begin executing it. And I'm going to keep asking for extra information from this execution of this query. And the object that you get back that allows you to keep asking for more stuff from it, that's called a portal in the language of PGWire. In the language of SQL, though, there's a similar concept, which is this cursor thing, right? Which is the thing we were implementing over the last couple of weeks to months. And a cursor is kind of a SQL level equivalent of this thing, right? You can keep asking this cursor for more and more information from a query. It turns out that in Postgres land, these cursors and portals are nicely implemented with the same underlying infrastructure, which is really quite nice for them and great, and I'm jealous. in Cockroach, it was quite difficult to actually make sure that was possible, so we ended up doing the two a little bit differently. That being said, it is important to make sure for compatibility reasons that we don't allow a cursor and a portal to coexist with the same name, right? Because that'd probably cause like mass confusion and just like problems. So basically I implemented a little patch that fixed that, and hopefully I will be able to merge this after responding to these comments here. So let's go ahead and dive into that, shall we? We'll check out our branch here, cursor portal interaction. And let's go ahead and fetch and rebase. So I guess it's just some comments about the test cases, basically. So that's should be relatively straightforward to deal with that. We'll open up our test case that we started. So this is actually a really cool style of test that we have in the code base, which allows you to to test. Normally we look at these tests that are sort of testing SQL inputs and outputs, right? Like you send a SQL query and assert that the output looks a certain way. But this is actually a little bit different. This is like asserting input and output about the low-level Postgres wire protocol messages. So basically this test allows you to send arbitrary PG wire messages and assert that the arbitrary PG wire responses that can come back are actually going to be, the right thing. So we need to do this because, of course, portals are these wire protocol level things and not things that are in SQL. Yeah, that tweet is really messed up, right? It's definitely super disturbing, and hopefully the guy who made this npm package change is like, I don't know, held to account. Even without this consequence, it was pretty bad what he did, and with this consequence, it becomes even more clear that you shouldn't do insane things like that. Be responsible, right? Don't send malware via your popular open source packages anywhere in the world, right? That just seems like a no-brainer. Right? I mean, what are you really doing by sending malware to a certain part of the world, right? It makes literally no sense. Okay, so line 1238, add a comment for this test, Do organizations not lock their dependency versions? I mean, I think some people do, but I think in the world of Node.js and JavaScript, people are often encouraged to just float their versions, right? I mean, I think when you have a system that has so many random little dependencies for everything, I think it's pretty common that you're just like, yeah, it'll probably be fine, Especially if it's just a little project, right? And maybe this project in the tweet was like, I mean, they weren't expecting there to be a war in Ukraine, right? So maybe like it was just sort of a hobby journalism project that became super important, and then they didn't have the technical know-how to lock their versions, because why would they, right? I think it's definitely on NPM. I mean, it's definitely the cultural stuff in NPM, I think is a little bit weird. Stuxnet malware would only activate when running on a specific model of SCADA. Yeah, exactly. A little bit more wide, like less granular than that, I would say, and with pretty bad effect. But yeah, I agree. That was a different thing. That's like nation state warfare. This is like random open source maintainer trying to make a difference and doing something very bad. Like, yeah. npm install view CLI to get the CLI tool, and exactly. I mean, forget like pinning a version or not. What about just installing the package in the first place? That's a great point. Oh man, it's so bad. And not to mention that it was obfuscated, right? If you look at that tweet and look at the tweets that preceded it, you can see that the author actually went out of their way to obfuscate the fact that the tool was actually going to do that, right? They like base64 encoded the code and like hid it in a random file and stuff like that. I mean, it's like bad, really bad stuff. Okay, so they wanted a comment for this test, which basically is test that declaring a cursor that, let's see, I guess it's test that creating a portal that declares a cursor with the same name as the portal fails with an error, with a duplicate cursor error. Done. What's up, Monopoly money launderer? Okay, so this is fine. We'll just add this one comment and then hopefully be able to merge this thing. Exciting. Ah. Okay. Whoops, I did not mean to close that window. Okay, so now that we've done with this, I think we can go ahead and merge this puppy. Makes everything you run in containers. Yeah, I think even running things in containers though, right? It's like if you ended up storing your data in that container, you'd get into some serious trouble. Some streams ago, you told us that your colleague uses Acme text editor for Go. You tried, it was cool and interesting. That's cool. I've actually never tried Acme, but it does seem like people tend to, yeah. I think, doesn't Russ Cox use Acme as well? Acme text editor Go. Who uses, oh, Rob Pike, Russ Cox. He's the only one to use it. Well, of course Rob Pike uses it because he wrote it, right? That's fun. Oddball text editors. It's always a good time, I feel like. Okay, so the next thing I want to kind of take a look at is this local prepared configuration thing. Which I guess it's still sort of failing tests, but let me go and recheck what the latest status is with it. So basically with this local prepared configuration, what we have is we're trying to automatically test that all of our logic tests, which are those tests that kind of run SQL and assert a particular output, we want to make sure that they work regardless of whether they are in ordinary execution mode, where you don't prepare a statement and then just run it on its own, or whether you're running it via that PGWire protocol level prepare and execute mode, which sometimes we've seen can kind of create some differences or basically surface issues that we wouldn't really otherwise notice. So the way that this branch works is that it adds a new configuration to all of these tests that is run by default that simply does both. it attempts to run the SQL both as an ordinary query, and it also then tries to parse it and kind of execute via this prepared modality. The reason it needs to parse it is that with prepared statements, you can't send a compound statement. You can't send a bunch of SQL separated by semicolons. You've got to send it sort of one statement at a time. So we have to sort of parse it and then, yeah, basically split the things apart by semicolons. Except, of course, you could have semicolons and strings, and you have to deal with that. But anyway, so that's why we kind of use our own parser to split the query apart. And so it's really quite simple. And ideally, we would be able to get this thing to work just sort of as is and then move on to their lives. But it looks like there's still like a couple of, actually quite a few random test failures to go through. I wonder, maybe this is actually a little bit uninteresting to do on stream. I'm not sure though. Does the parser create some sort of AST? Yes. So the way the parser works is that we use a kind of a Yak grammar parser generator thing, which is this enormous, Zachariah, the project is a little bit out of date, but I think we'll actually get back to that project in a little bit. So I'm going to leave it for now. But anyway, so the parser is this, very lovely 14,000 line grammar file that you can kind of see if you're familiar with like Yak and parser generators in general, the way it works is you kind of write these rules, and inside of the rules you write down what the language does to give back basically an AST node. And or sometimes, I mean, in like a simple calculator or something, you don't have to even use AST nodes. You can just sort of like do the action inside, like inline in the grammar. But of course, since it's a language and something fairly complicated, you have to build an AST out of it. So we have this whole package called tree, which is what we use to basically represent this big AST. So for example, if you're parsing this, AXPR or AXPR thing, you return a or XPR AST node that has, the other two expressions inside, as an example. And so SQL is kind of weird because it's got kind of like two different languages in it. I mean, many programming languages are like this. There's sort of this expression language and like statement language, sort of, right? Of course, in Lisp, everything's an expression, but in SQL, that's not the case. So we have this big like expression sublanguage that's used for things like 2+2 or executing a function on a bunch of other stuff. But the main other thing is this thing called statement, which is a big expression or a big AST interface that most of the other things kind of slot into, basically. It's a very high level overview of our AST stuff. PromQL uses Yak as well. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I think like people I think the like parser world has kind of moved beyond Yak in a lot of places, but at the same time, I find it easier to understand than some of the more complex alternatives, which use different, there's all that academic stuff about LR parsers or LL parsers, which to be honest, never remember how that stuff works. But I think in order to use some of these more modern ones, you have to understand a little bit more about those different forms. What's up, Dirter? Buena tarde. To you too. Hope you're doing great. Prometheus had a custom implementation, then it was moved to Yak. Another thing that people tend to do these days is actually prefer handwritten parsers, which I don't know if I have a strong feeling about it, but I think for example, my colleagues at Materialize, I think Materialize uses a handwritten SQL parser, if I recall correctly, as opposed to a parser generator of any sort. I think they're kind of easier in some sense and harder in another, maybe. It's probably harder to see the forest from the trees, but maybe easier to implement random little things. Yeah, definitely. Definitely it needs to be something that more than just a few people can understand. That is for certain. But yeah, anyway, so for this thing, like, I guess it's a little bit sloggy to maybe go through all of these right now. Although maybe I should. I'm interested in this one. So here we have seemingly a prepared statement that returns a completely different result set, which that should never happen. So I actually wonder what that's about. Maybe I'll look into that one real quick. So actually, let me go ahead and run this locally so we can get on the same page here. So we're going to run dev test logic files equals multi statement config equals local prepared. Does this work? It does seem to work. Durder, how is your week going? Are you feeling free, light, airy, unbound? Untoward? That's a little bit different than what I was expecting. Is the opposite of untoward unaway? Climbing? That's cool. I haven't been climbing in years, honestly. I think that I might have, I bet there's probably a lot of other rock climbers in the chat. I feel like I might have like permanently damaged my fingers to some extent from rock climbing. Like I haven't been in so long, and I figured at that point like maybe my any injuries that I might have had would have healed, or any like pain that I would have might have healed. But I feel like I still, if I like really press on my fingers on something, I kind of still feel a little bit of like tendon feelings, which doesn't feel great. It doesn't necessarily feel ideal. And I do wonder whether I like, I don't know, damage myself or something like that. I don't know. What is it with programming and climbing? I feel like I know so many programmers who do rock climbing. Don't totally get that. Yoga? Yoga's a good thing. I could definitely stretch a little bit more. Okay, so we can definitely reproduce this test failure, and it does look exactly the same as it does in CI. So let's go ahead and investigate. So line 35. Second statement returns an error and causes the whole batch to roll back. I see. So I think the issue here is presumably that it's basically because of this artificial thing that we're doing where we're splitting apart compound statements into two. That basically makes this whole thing kind of invalid. I don't know how easy it's going to be to fix that. It's not really a real error. I guess this is kind of the problem with having these universal. Maybe we could just turn off this test configuration in this multi-statement test, basically. Maybe that would be a good thing. Maybe we just turn off the local prepared mode here. I think that seems fairly reasonable. We turn off the local prepared mode because this test depends on multi-statement statements being run in single batches, which is not doable with prepared statements. Okay, so let's go ahead and retry here to make sure that that did something. Okay, does that not do anything? Actually, forget the syntax for turning on and off these configs. And of course, I can't find any with disabled configs now. Okay, like this. Logic test, not something. Oh, maybe it... Oh, I used test logic instead of logic test. Okay, well, that would explain things. Except it still does the same thing. I wonder if it's just because if you explicitly ask for a config, it'll run it even if it was disabled. It's probably something like that. No. Okay, well, it's actually because I didn't use the right... I think I need to go like this. Okay, hopefully this will work. Hopefully this will work. And you won't see any test failures. I have a gripe. My gripe is that I have this ceiling fan in here. It's very effective at cooling my room, but it's also fairly noisy. I'm not sure if you can hear it on the stream, but it's like this kind of like overly loud noise. Like a rhythmic humming. It almost sounds like there's a little bit of a pulse in noise every time that the fan goes around on its axis. I don't know what it is. One time I kind of went up there and tried to figure it out. and I didn't see anything particularly obvious. So it's irritating, and I don't know what to do about it. That's my gripe. Gripe over. Gripe over. How about this one? Select index. Line 464. So is this just yet another? Maybe like all of the problems that we're going to see are really about these compound statements. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. I guess we can fix this by going like so. Whoops. I feel like this is a little tacky. It's like, it's convenient to somehow, I mean, the reason that this is failing is that the new configuration, even if there's a compound statement, it prepares everything individually, but only looks at the output from the final statement. Maybe what I should do to fix this, okay, maybe I have an idea. I can fix the test harness maybe. So instead of only looking at the output from the final one, why don't we have it concatenate all the output, which I think is the same thing as what this thing actually does, maybe? Actually, I'm curious. What if we say, why don't we test that? Query I. We say select 1, select 2. What do we actually get from this in a normal configuration? Do we get this? No, we also only get the last output. So maybe it's, but what if there's something that doesn't return any output? That this equals off or something. Maybe it's just like, it just takes the most recent output. Maybe we could mimic that in our test harness. Expected 2, but found 1, 2. Huh? What does that mean? Does it take everything but the last one, maybe?
Relational databases don't scale because
maybe it just takes everyone but the last one.
Join, and write to disk.
Thank you, Rob White, for the 2 months of subscription. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, what if it's like this? Okay, so it's expecting 1, 2. It's feeling like, what? Wait. Maybe I just did something wrong the first time? This one is expecting all 3. Okay, so what if it's like this? This was getting all 3. And if I remove all the set statements, giving it back to what it used to be, then we get a... Also 1, 2, 3. Wait, what? Did I just do something wrong the first time? Or is there something special about having 2 statements? Did I just completely do something weird the very first time I did this? Also very frustrating that this test is so slow. It's doing like almost... Okay. What? Ghosts? Is it ghosts? What if it's... what if it has to do with... What if it has to do with whether how many lines that we have in the expected output or something? I think it has to do with the lines in the expected output. Look, so expected 1, 2, 3 found 3, but if I delete the 2 and the 3 and I just leave a 1, I bet it's going to say expected 1 but found 1, 2, 3. So I think there's just something wrong with the... God, this is so annoying. This is so annoying. Okay. Why? Why the heck would this be the case? Actual results raw. Exec query. Okay, so we make this array. If we see any notice, we do some stuff. Ignore that. If there's the column names, which we don't care about. Otherwise, we append actual results raw to each of the values in turn. And we do it for each result set. So basically, we just make this big flat array of all of the things. Normalize each row in the result by mapping each run of contiguous white space to a single space. This test harness has gotten extremely complicated. So I think what's actually just going on. It does so many different things. So I guess I could... I feel like I need tests for my tests now. So what's happening? Okay, we expected 1, but we found 1, 2, 3. Expected 1, but we found 1, 2, 3. I guess the question is, when do we ever find not 1, 2, 3? So why don't we go ahead and we're going to reopen this thing. We're going to put this back as 1, 2, 3. And then it's going to say that it found 1. And I want to understand why that but found query options like this, right? But found, and then act formatted dot string is what we're printing out. In act formatted, we say t.format values, actual results raw, and then vals per line. So why don't we go ahead and also print out right here, format.fprintf, buff, actual results. And this thing is a string array. I guess we can, yeah. I guess we can go like this. For line is in actual results raw. We'll say actual results line. And then we'll say this query.vals per line thing as well. So we'll do something like this. Just to understand what's actually going on here. Let's rerun this. I'm gonna quickly go get some more water. Be right back. What's up, crypto? Things are going good. Things are going good. Okay, actual results 3, 1, 3. So it literally only gets back. I needed to put a new line. It literally still is only getting back a weird thing inside of actual results raw, which makes very little sense to me. So I guess the next step is for us to understand why actual results raw is getting truncated? If it is? It's like, for example, you know, if we then go back to this and remove these two, it's like the actual results should not differ depending on what the expected results are, right? Like that seems to be a terrible problem. Actual results 1, actual results 2, actual results 3. So it kind of seems like there's something funky going on as soon as we introduce a second line, right? No, it's not even that. It's the second line is also fine. Expected 1, 2, but found 1, 2, 3. But if we introduce the third line, then it goes off the rails. How does that make any sense? There's obviously like a very weird bug here. Dude, what? How could this be? How could this be? Sometimes you see things that just don't make sense. And when that happens, you just have to carefully think. Carefully think what could be going wrong here, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to add more printfs. Is the comparison broken or is it the parsing part? Absence of logic in a package literally named logic. So I believe it's... I think what's going on is it's probably this chunk of code that's getting messed up, because this is the code that asks for more result sets. And in this particular case, what we're doing is we're not just getting a normal query with many rows. We're getting 3 result sets. Each of these queries is a result set. And it seems like we're probably breaking out of this loop early or something. Like maybe... That doesn't actually seem to be happening. I think we're going to use the debugger. I think that'll be an easier thing to do here. So we're going to go to our test logic configuration, local prepared, and we're going to use this select index file. And we're going to set a breakpoint here. See what happens. Uh-oh. I need to have this thing like generate everything or something. What does it say? It was saying, okay, dev generate protobuf maybe. Okay, so while that's going, things are not going my way today. All right, well, we'll keep printing things out for the time being. Screw the debugger. We don't need that thing. So we're going to print out Where do we end up actually emitting this thing exactly, or? T.error. Okay, so we're basically running T dot. We can use T.log to like emit random stuff. So let's go ahead and emit some random stuff in this T.nextResult set thing. So we're gonna say T.log T.log F. Print out next result set. And then we can go ahead and probably just go like this. We're just gonna like verbosely log a bunch of crap basically. And the length of calls, like this is actually kind of an, well, we sort of know what this is. We'll just print it out too. Len calls is len calls. We'll say len vals actually. Then down here we're gonna say t.t.log f found vals. And we'll just print out all our vals. Yeah. Let's see what this tells us. Does this tell us anything interesting?
The data bank's too big.
We will find out.
I have to narrow down the search.
How are you going to do that?
By guessing.
Printf is better than all. Sometimes printf sometimes it doesn't work that well actually. if your tooling intercepts like the normal standard out and stuff like that, you can get into trouble. So it's kind of nice to use the log things that people are expecting. Okay, so next result set, len calls 1, found vals, whatever. So we need to figure out how to print this thing better. But in any case, like the point is that we're only finding one result set, which is very, very messed up. Because if we go back and we change the expectation to have fewer than expected outputs, I think we're gonna see more than one result set. And why the heck is that? That is literally so weird. You see, we start getting more result sets. We get the expected number of result sets if the output is wrong. But if the output is right, we only get one result set. And that is highly disturbing, right? That is highly disturbing. Printing as a debugger in general, I see what you mean. Yeah. Sure. I actually do like using debuggers, to be honest, but there's gotta be some reason that we break out of this loop, and why? Why? I don't actually see any place where we break out of this loop as a thing. Is it doing the comparison inside the for loop? It is not. We assemble, we actually get all of the output, we collect it into this thing called actual results raw, right? But I don't think we're getting an error here either, because we do get down here. We'll put a little output here. So t.t.log made it out of the result set loop. Because if we actually early return, we're not gonna even hit this thing. And I just don't think that that's actually what's happening though. And I don't see any breaks or anything at all, really. And where does rows come from? Rows is coming from our db.query, right? Oh, I think I know what's going on, and it's actually very dumb, which is very typical for me. What's going on is that the reason that it's failing the other way each time is that we're actually running it in that new configuration. Okay, let's carefully make sure that okay. So if I run config equals local, which is the config that we know works, I think we're going to get a good answer here. Things will work fine. But if I run with the config local prepared, it's going to fail. And that's like the entire problem that we were trying to solve. So I'm actually, I played myself, which is typical. I think sometimes with the stream, it tends to make me not think very carefully. I just kind of like YOLO stuff. Okay, so this is as expected. So in the local configuration, this does work fine. But in the local prepared configuration, this is going to fail. And that's kind of as expected because we haven't implemented it correctly in local prepared yet. Right. So to fix this, it's going to be quite simple. No more pointless logging, which is not really necessary. We're going to go down to where we were doing this result concatenation stuff. And so here we are in not this one, but this one. So here we are in exec query. We have a bunch of statements to prepare and execute. And you see how we just execute all but the last statement. I think this is actually what's not quite right. And it's actually a little bit difficult to get this to work properly, isn't it? Because we're expecting a single rows, but we actually want multiple. Or we want one big rows that contains all of the outputs from all of the intermediary rows. And I don't know how easy it's going to be to make that happen, unless there's a way to use this result set stuff. You know? Which I don't know. I guess we could implement our own rows implementation, but no, it doesn't give back an interface. It gives back... It's kind of annoying. It's not going to be an easy way to fix this, is there? Except by changing the interface to expect multiple rows, each of which has multiple result sets, which maybe wouldn't be that bad. Maybe I ought to just do it that way. I could do it that way. It wouldn't be that bad, right? So up here, we're going to say, instead of just having one GoSQL.rows, we're going to have multiple. And I guess we'll kind of go like rows is. I guess we can just say rows is equal to GoSQL.rows of res. And otherwise we'll say something like this, I guess. So rows is equal to append rows res. We'll actually get rid of this whole switch since we're gonna be doing it this way. But it's actually quite tricky, isn't it? Because some of the times these won't even have columns or rows or anything. They'll just sort of be empty. And in that case, we have to skip them. So basically, it's tricky. Basically, it's tricky. What's up, CryptoCod? Are you struggling with GC pauses in Go? No, so we don't typically have, we haven't really seen GC pause become a problem for the database. Definitely, it's difficult to build a system that can handle multiple different classes of queries, trying to guarantee latency, some good latency for all of them. But that's kind of a general problem in any system, whether it's garbage collected or not. Sort of like quality of service or admission control, right? You can always figure out a way to overwhelm a system by sending it too much load, so that either, depending on your strategy, either queries will start to get like, unboundedly large latencies if you're just sort of queuing everything, or you'll start to drop. You'll have to figure out a way to shed the load, something like this. You can never really make a reliable system that just tries to execute every single thing at the same time. You're always going to have to some kind of queuing system or load shedding system. And this is related to your question because there are many worse problems in databases that affect latency due to shared resources than garbage collector pauses. The Go garbage collector is actually very, very good. It's quite quick and efficient, and it doesn't cause large pauses. Bigger problems are things like IO wait. The disks are slower than you were expecting, or we do a lot of network stuff. There's a lot of memory usage, a lot of CPU. It's like GC pause doesn't actually end up becoming the bottleneck for us, really ever. So I guess my answer to you is like no, but your underlying question is, I think, still interesting in the sense that database systems do have to deal with multiple large queries and small queries kind of like contending with each other, and there's no easy answer there. We're working on sort of a admission control system that helps with this problem, but it's a difficult problem on the whole. I don't know if that helped answer your question. I'm wondering if you're asking about how the database performs, or you're sort of wondering about how good the Go garbage collector is. Either way, both interesting questions, I think. Yeah, Go GC pauses are quite good, especially compared to things like Java. Yeah, I've definitely also experienced issues with JVM garbage collector in my past lives. It seems like the Go one is quite a bit better. Bye-bye, der. No, Go is not a virtual machine. It doesn't have a virtual machine, no. It compiles straight to machine code. Does the JVM's garbage collector garbage collect the JVM itself? I think it does. Probably, right? This is kind of a pain in the butt, what I'm dealing with right now. I wonder, it really does seem like the easiest thing here would be to somehow assemble the rows into multiple result sets, but I don't know if that's like really possible. Oh, I see. It deletes the whole JVM. That would be funny. Yeah, this is not a particularly easy thing to fix, unfortunately. But I think it should be worth it. If expecting an error, then read all result rows, since some errors are only triggered after initial rows are returned. Break early if an error is returned. I think for here we can kind of just say for rows in rows. Does Go outperform JVM-based languages in memory consumption too? It probably depends more on the program being executed than you would think. I think there's ways to use. I think probably like the JVM is a overall less memory efficient system because, well, it may depend on whether it's, like which JVM language you're talking about. But like in Java, for example, everything is an object, and it's a bit harder to use memory in a way that's not super object-y, you know, with a lot of intra-object links and fewer kind of flat memory use than you would expect. And Go makes it a lot easier to have stack allocated memory than Java, and it also makes it easier to have nicely packed arrays and packed objects and stuff like that. But I would say that it's probably not a limitation of the JVM itself. It's probably more of a limitation of the languages that run on top of the JVM. I don't know for certain, though. This is just kind of my guess. Let's go ahead and rename this thing to be roses. Yeah, I think the Postgres wire protocol decision was a pretty good one. Of course, Cockroach also supports much more. It's much more compatible with Postgres than just the wire protocol. It's very compatible with Postgres. Besides just that protocol level, the dialect is as compatible as possible. We support a lot of the same functionality, not all of it. Yeah, it's difficult to support all of a different database system because database systems are very large and complicated. But CockroachDB does support a good chunk of Postgres. Probably like, I don't know, 80%, something like that. I don't know how to quantify it, but I think the main difference is that in Postgres it's got a lot of plugins that people rely on, and CockroachDB does not. Of course, it's unable to support using Postgres plugins because it would be very difficult to have the interoperability that you'd need between like the C plugin language and the Go language and everything to make it all fit together. But you know, for the popular ones, we have sort of implemented them in Go as well, like what is it called, the Postgres geospatial library we've kind of supported in Go as well because people like it. So I don't know, there's pluses and minuses, but we're fairly compatible. Yes, that is definitely true. Definitely true. What's up, JB Pratt? And hey, Dallas. Different feel than what you're used to. Fun language. Yeah, I like Go. It's pretty nice. What were you programming before Go? Comparing pros and cons of Kotlin versus Go. People like Kotlin quite a bit. I've never used it. What kind of project are you expecting to be working on? Okay, so we capture our exec error, and then we leave, basically. Paradigm is different also with no exceptions. Deal with that and figure out folder structuring. like package structure and stuff like that. Yeah, the package, that's a big difference from Java, is that like people prefer to have way more code in a package than in Java, where it's like you want to have just basically like one little class, or like each file is one class. People in Go do not like doing things like that. Backend 45 microservices. Yeah, Zig is really cool. I want to start looking at Zig a little bit. I haven't really done so too much, but it does seem interesting. I've seen people compare Zig to more of a C. I feel like people like to put Zig and Rust in the same category. Rust is like the C++, Zig is like the C, and Go is like the Java. You know, they're sort of like, yeah, the next wave of languages. I do think that Java is more, or Go is more of a Java than a C or a C++. One thing that I would love from Zig, if they had it in Go, is the comp time stuff. I feel like Zig comp time stuff seems really, really nice. We've done so much in this project with kind of compile time template metaprogramming, but it's been all super custom. Whereas the comp time stuff is like, wow, you can really do anything you want, and it's the same language, and it all seems really quite nice. Best practice other than the official docs. I think people really like to talk about, I think I have it in here, right? I have, no, I guess I don't. What is it called? What the heck is that thing called? What is it? Effective Go. I think this thing, I guess this is the official docs, but it's really, really good. It has a lot of good best practices that we follow a lot. I don't know if there's like a ton of other ones, honestly. I think the Go documentation is quite good, and I think of it as canonical. Okay, so we iterate through all these rows, we get our exec error, we escape, and then we're good to go. Now, if in the case where we're not inside of a error case, we need to do another big loop here. And we basically have it all the way out here. And I think what we're gonna do probably is only check. It's kind of a pain, really. So we need to delete this. Well, I guess we can kind of do it like this. Defer func for rows in range roses. Rows.close. Okay. If we're in notice trace, we have to force close the results for the notice handler from libpq to return results. So here, I guess it's the same thing where we have to say something like this. Okay. Then I guess what we do here is we say, kind of go like, could probably just go like this. Take the 0th rows, we assert that the columns are the same, and then we have a bigger kind of loop where we probably should make a function for this, but whatever. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if this solves our problem. Expected 4 columns, but found 0. Query I. Set tracing equals on KV.
Computers hooked into over 1,000 data banks throughout the world.
Yeah, I think in this case, thanks for the follow, CryptoCod. I think in this case, I guess what we need to do is just sort of say, I feel like in the case where we have 0 columns, we kind of just skip something like that. It's basically if there's nothing in a result set, we don't need to do this assertion. What's up, undefined? I think maybe it's kind of like this then. I'm gonna go down here. Basically, it's like if not rows.next, what does this do? It says prepares the next result. Basically, we just have to skip setting the columns or checking them if there's no next result, something like that. What does this say? Next result set prepares the next result set for reading. If it reports whether there is further result sets or false, if there's no further result set, or if there's an error advancing to it. After calling, the next should always be called before scanning. So we only call this after we're finished with the current result set, basically. It's kind of tricky. It seems like you can't really peek. You can't really figure out whether the current rows has any data in it without advancing, right? So maybe basically what we need to do is take all of this stuff Well, here's another question. Okay, let's go ahead and see what happens if we run a test at the top here that's just says query with 0 columns expected. Then we run set this equals off or something. What does this do? Does this fail or what? Or does this just fail to parse? Because I feel like if this fails to parse, we're actually good to go. We can just check to see if there's 0 columns. And if there's 0, we can do something special. Invalid test statement query. Okay, so it's like literally you're not allowed to have 0 columns. Whereas if I say query I and then I say set disequal off or something, this should fail with expected one column found 0. Expected one column found 0. Okay, so in that case, I think we do have enough information to do stuff, right? We can. Does Cockroach also follow Postgres's MVCC model? Not, like, kind of. Cockroach is also an MVCC system, but we don't use exactly the same stuff that they do. I mean, for example, Postgres, it allows you to do things like understand the last transaction ID of that updated a particular row, and there's a few little different attributes that you can get out from the Postgres's MVCC model. And CockroachDB has a slightly different transaction model than Postgres, and that kind of makes it so that our MVCC metadata is not totally identical. But that being said, it is an MVCC system, and so if you're used to using things like, time travel queries or whatever, you can do that in Cockroach as well. MVCC systems are, they're all quite similar in a sense, right? It does define quite a bit of how the system works. So model view controller. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So I think in this case, what we can do is basically say, if we see 0 columns, I think we just leave. We just skip to the next. Or maybe it's like, how about this? If len calls is equal to 0 and I is equal to, and we've made it to the end. It's such a mess. It's so stateful and gross, Found calls equals false. Found calls is set to true once we've found the first statement that actually returns columns. How about this? Okay, so we set the thing to be false. If len calls is equal to 0, and so if we haven't found the calls, and len calls is equal to 0, and I is equal to len rows is -1, then we can do this thing. We've made it to the end of our result sets. Oh, and then we also have to say, if len calls is greater than 0, found calls is equal to true. Oh no, it's not quite right, because then we've never entered this loop. This is such a gross, nasty pile of booleans. I can't even take it. I cannot even take it. No, we would actually make it here, right? Because if it's greater than 0, then we found it. We're good to go. Okay. No. Because we need to enter this case if len calls is not equal to 0, right? So it's sort of like, okay. If len calls is greater than 0, or not found calls, what's up, anti-super? If we have non-zero, more than 0 calls, or we've made it to the end of our result sets without finding a non-zero column result, we need to return an error about mismatched call numbers might need to return an error about mismatched columns. Okay, how about that? I think that that will maybe solve our problem, maybe. Expected 1 columns have found 0. Oh, well, that's because we made a bogus test, which we can delete. SQL rows are closed. Okay, that's not good. Of course, it doesn't tell us where this error gets created from, which is always irritating. Since we're just propagating errors, of course, we get into this problem. But that I guess I don't understand it, because it seems like we only close the rows over here in this defer statement. So what could be the problem? Oh, is it? It's probably the fact that I reuse this variable here. I think I've got to say something like, I've got to go like this, basically. Same thing, huh? Well, that's great. Really would be nice to be able to use the debugger, huh? What's the error that I get? Cannot use SQL dollars. Okay, so dev, just run dev generate. Does that fix my problem? Okay. So maybe now the debugger will work. Let's find out. Isn't this cute? There's a little like progress bar that's basically just the Go gopher. Somebody made a plugin for that. I think it's very nice. Okay, so this seems to actually have worked, which is cool. And let's go ahead and see if we can figure out where everything goes to heck. So wait, where does this exactly fail though? It fails because fails on line 8. And line 8 is just the first. It's actually the second statement. The second statement is the one that fails. Okay. So why don't we continue to here then? Let's just step out. No, we're already in that error. Okay. So we need to, let's start over. Okay. So how can we figure out where this error gets emitted? Because we can just set a breakpoint in all of the error returning areas, right? It's a little nasty, but huh? Okay. Oh, I see. It's because... No, I don't see. I do not see. Oh, select index flags versus select index. Is that my problem? Okay, let's try this again. I guess I know for a fact that I'm not going to hit it because we didn't end up seeing that error. So if I continue, I'm just going to probably miss it, right? Yeah. Okay, so we'll try again. I have not found the right error breakpoint, which means what? Not here, not here. It's down below in actual results land. What if it's actually in the defer? Wouldn't that be funny? What if it's actually up in here? No, because we ignore that error. Okay, so I still don't get it. So I think maybe what I'll do is I'll set a breakpoint after this point. We'll set it here. Continue. Okay. Step. Continue. Oh, is it this? Oh. Oh. Okay, duh. We have to go like so. Maybe this is the problem? Can't keep using the 0th element of roses. I have to use the current element of roses. I don't think that there's such a thing as break on error. That would be pretty cool. I'm not sure how they would implement that because an error is just an ordinary object. Okay, that did fix the problem. So that's good to know. Roses, yeah. What's the plural of rose? Roses. Roses. Okay, so given this, I think we're good to go. And we should be happy. And this should work in every test configuration now. Yeah, kind of an awkward word, huh? Maybe I should call it row sets. Roses. Just roses? Yeah. I think I'll just leave it like this for now. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do at this point is go ahead and well, first of all, we have to delete our change to this because it's not relevant. Then I'm going to go ahead and add both of these changes. We also have to delete this. Where we iterate and log a bunch of stuff pointlessly, we can delete that now. Then we can go ahead and make a commit. And go ahead and push it up. And I think we're just gonna let CI rerun all of our tests for us so that we know what we need to fix next. I think in the meantime, what I kind of wanted to investigate. So there's one thing that you might notice about these prepared statements that we've been talking about, which is that we don't actually ever test whether the prepared statement will work if it's got placeholders. And a big part of prepared statements in SQL is placeholders. That's kind of like one of the major points of it, actually, that you can do something like, instead of saying, you know, find a good example here. Like this statement, for example, insert into other column values 43, 42, 16. Instead of actually creating a string in your application that has 43, 42, and 16 in it, you can do something like this. I'll just make a copy. You can basically do something like this, prepare X as insert into other column values, and you just put a placeholder like this. And then when you actually go to execute it, you can use language support to say something like, you know, execute X of, you know, 43, 42, 16. And this protects you from SQL injection errors. So people really like using these placeholders as a way to avoid SQL injection errors. And it's a very important thing, and people use this all the time. And ideally what we would actually do in our prepared statement auto test is that all of our test cases, and we have like, you know, however many we do, a lot, we're going to try to automatically find scalar elements like a 2, for example, or a a string in single quotes, these scalar elements that, and automatically try to replace them with placeholders in a way to hopefully be able to test that the database is properly handling placeholder values. And we've seen some bugs occasionally in this because the type checker behaves a little bit differently with placeholders, and generally things can kind of go wrong with placeholders because it's a bit of a more complicated path. So what I wanted to do next is attempt to write a little program that automatically replaces these scalars with placeholders. Any fuzzing tests? Yes, we have a lot of randomized tests that you might call fuzzing. So fuzzing, of course, has a pretty specific connotation in the world of software testing, which is really about basically random strings, trying to send random byte strings to protocols to make sure that the protocol does not explode when given malformed inputs. And definitely for parts of the system like PGWire, where the protocol is very fiddly and specific, we do actually just do traditional fuzzing for those parts of the system. But for something like testing SQL, it's actually very difficult to do fuzzing because obviously SQL itself is not only very semantically precise, right? You have to make a string that is a SQL statement that's valid in the grammar. Not only does it have to be valid in the grammar, though, it also has to be like semantically valid in a sense, or else it won't tell the database to do anything interesting. Like you can make a random SQL query that doesn't reference any columns that are real, or you can make a random SQL query that tries to insert data of the wrong type into a table. So you have to develop some really complicated infrastructure to be able to do random testing of SQL. That being said, we have in fact invested a lot into random testing of SQL in the database. We took inspiration from something called SQL Smith, which took inspiration from something called CSmith, which generates random statements based on the grammar. And it more than that, it actually knows the schema of the data in the database and tries to assemble random statements that are relevant to that schema. And so that's been a very effective way of testing as well. And on top of that, we've actually implemented this technique called TLP, which I've talked about a few times on the stream. I think we even have a command for it. So TLP is a testing method that partitions random queries that we generate using the SQL Smith thing by adding predicates and making sure that when you sum up the results of 3 types of queries with this predicate, whether the predicate's true, whether the predicate's false, and whether the predicate is null, if you sum up all of those result sets into a single result set, it should be identical to the query without the predicate. And that's a very, very effective way of detecting logic errors. So we have a lot of tests of this nature, and we're always making more because it's very important to do randomized testing in databases. On top of all of this, you've triggered me. I love ranting about testing. On top of all of this, we have a lot of what we call metamorphic testing. And metamorphic testing is where you take your giant test corpus, maybe it's a randomized test, maybe it's a static test corpus, and you change the values of internal knobs that might be things like batch sizes that don't affect the output of the data of the query, but just sort of affect the way that the query is executed. And there's all sorts of different metamorphic variables that we have inside of the database that we use to attempt to flush out some of these more tricky bugs. And actually using prepared statements or not is a perfect example of a metamorphic variable in the sense, because just like I was saying earlier, a statement that's executed with prepare and execute should always be exactly the same as a statement that's executed without prepare and execute. So it's a classic metamorphic variable that you can either have on or off to still get the same results. Okay, rant over. Do I think that the book Go Programming Language is good to learn Go? Yeah, people do like it quite a bit. I've never actually read it, but people say it's quite good. And also, hello, Cravo. Obviously, I'm very passionate about testing. Testing databases is a rich and interesting field. Okay, so I think that what I want to do next is basically attempt to, do this parsing. And I wonder how we're actually going to be able to do it. Learn Go with tests. Learn TDD with Go. This is cool. Property-based tests is a similar type of thing as what I've been talking about. Property-based testing and metamorphic testing are kind of close cousins. Pretty cool. Yeah, this seems interesting. Maybe I'll take a look at this, and if it seems good, maybe I'll add it to my little exclamation point Go thing for people to take a look at when they are interested in figuring out how to learn Go. Cool. Well, good luck to you. So, basically, what we've got to do here is, you see how we have prepare and execute. You see how we have prepare and query. Ultimately, what we need to figure out how to do here is find a way to replace all scalar values in the query. Maybe it's not even all, or a random subset of scalar values in the query with placeholders. Then send the scalar values that we replaced to query. That's our task for now. So I think the way that we'll need to do this, we actually have some stuff that does the opposite, right? We have some code that crawls an AST and searches for placeholders. But I don't know if we have a way to do the opposite right now, right? I wonder if we need to kind of do has placeholders. Let's just see how this sort of is done. You don't really remember where we, okay, num placeholders. So this is interesting. Let's see, where do we run init on placeholder info? Let's see, so it's actually that we're, I suppose what we could do here is, is there some kind of like walker thing that we implemented at some point? P.ast. I know we have this like, let's see, expression walker, right? What is this? Tree.walk expr, but it only takes an expr. Do not count on the walk statement or walk expr machinery to visit all expressions contained in a query. Only a subset are found. Well, that's not great. Maybe we should take a look at walk statement. Beware that walk statement does not necessarily traverse all parts of a statement. For example, it will not walk into subquery nodes within a from clause. It's pretty interdependent with a logic for constructing a query plan. And who calls this? Process placeholder annotations. Performs an order independent global traversal of the provided statement, annotating all placeholders with a type. I feel like this is quite relevant. I feel like we should be able to do something like this. Maybe we'll make a new function in this package that does it, since it does look like this walk statement is a package private thing. Bug you about testing, but can you give an example of applying metamorphic testing in your system? Is it to help create test oracles for query results? So it's actually the opposite. Making test oracles is sort of a goal of that TLP thing that I mentioned. So for example, you can make a test oracle that is statically generated, like this huge corpus of logic tests that we have here. Like this is a massive corpus of query inputs and outputs that we've generated over the years, just writing regression tests and whatnot. And this is a great query oracle itself because we just have so many of them, right? And so for example, a metamorphic variable applied across this whole static test corpus could be something like the size of the batch of keys that we write to storage at the same time, right? We've seen bugs in that before. So what we do is we apply a metamorphic variable that says at random, based on a seed, either use, a size 1 batch or a size 20 batch or a production size batch or a really big size batch, right? But sort of at random. And we make sure that no matter what that's set to, this oracle is still going to hold, right? We're still going to get the right outputs given the input, the same statically encoded outputs for the given input. And there's lots of different metamorphic variables of that nature. So batch size is a good one because it's easy to talk about. But there's other ones like, for example, so Cockroach is a distributed SQL database, and it needs to be able to work no matter where the data is placed in a cluster. So imagine you have a multi-node Cockroach cluster, and you would like to randomize data placement to make sure that the data, the query still always has the same results. Randomize the data placement. You also can randomize like the processor placement, right? We have this system that distributes query processing across the cluster, but again, it needs to work exactly the same no matter where those query processors get distributed to. So that's another good example of a metamorphic variable. Another good one is, so SQL systems need to know how to spill to disk when there's when a query is taking too much memory to be able to fit into main memory. Like if you're doing a sort of 2 terabytes of data and you don't have 2 terabytes of memory in your computer, you need to be able to do an external sort and write all the data out to disk and sort it externally. So a good other example of a metamorphic variable is changing that threshold at which we decide to spill. So rather than having to have only a huge result set triggering disk spilling, you should be able to make disk spilling happen at 10 bytes or something like that, or 20 bytes, or 200 kilobytes, or any random number, and it has to always exactly work the same, no matter what that value is set to. So the metamorphic variables are actually independent of test oracles. It's good to develop several test oracles, but you should be able to apply your metamorphic variables to all of your different test oracles, if that makes sense. MT variables help you focus test cases. It's not necessarily that. It's kind of more like if you have like many orthogonal parts of your system, and you don't want to have to write, n by m different test cases, right? If you have, n features and m other features, and you don't want to have to like always combine, write 10 test cases for each test case just because you have a different mode of executing the system. You want to have to just write one test case and still be able to kind of cross apply all of those other ways of executing things on the first n features, if that makes sense. It comes up in systems that have a lot of intersecting features, right? I don't know if that makes sense. I wouldn't say it's about focusing test cases. I think it's about allowing you to write test cases that are logical only, so not thinking about the internals of a system, right? It can be a totally quote unquote black box test, right? SQL is the ultimate input output of the system. So let's just write tests in SQL, and we can use metamorphic variables to allow testing all sorts of different parts of the system with the same test cases that we originally wrote just for SQL inputs and outputs. I don't know if that's totally clear, but we're we want to write a blog post about. Yeah, you set up relations that must hold, exactly. So that's why I mentioned property-based testing. It's sort of similar to that because you're testing this property of query correctness while varying stuff in the background to make sure that it still works despite those things varying in the background. We want to do a blog post about just the general different ways that we do SQL testing in the system because it's so interesting, but we haven't gotten around to it yet. Maybe soon. Maybe I'll make a new file here called like call it like I think I'll call it like replace scalars. It's really a test. It's really like a test file. That is a classic joke. That is totally classic. So we're gonna call this func replace scalars with placeholders. It's going to take a tree.statement, maybe, or just an S statement. And we're going to return what? We're going to return what? Basically, we're going to return a list of scalars that we replaced. I think it's basically just like a list of scalars that we replaced. So basically like a list of expers, I think. And I think we actually even just call it expers. So let's make a comment. We're going to say replace scalars with placeholders, traverses a statement replacing scalars with placeholders, returning, placing, so it's replacement. Yeah, it returns the list of replaced scalars in order. So basically, I think that's really all there is to it. And so what we're going to do to implement this thing is we're going to say walk statement. And we need to pass in a visitor and then the statement we're going to walk. And we don't care. We know that this stuff is not going to get changed. So in fact, we can just ignore the outputs. Now we just need to implement this visitor, I guess. So we're going to say type scalar replacer struct. And we're going to go ahead and implement the visitor thing. Is it this though? What does this thing take? This is just it is just a visitor. Okay. And it takes an exper. Okay, so basically the way this is going to work is we're going to say, we're going to switch on the type of exper. So switch exper.type. And if it is how do we know if something's a scalar? I guess if it's a datum? And then otherwise we're going to, those are just going to return recurse true, new exper, exper. And I think we return something new only if visit pre is called for each node before recursing. Upon return, if recurse is false, the visit will not recurse into the subtree. Replaces the visited expression and can be used for rewriting expressions. Oh, right. So I actually do think we need to care quite a bit about this new expert thing. So what we can do here is get back new statement changed like this. And we're going to pass in a scalar replacer. And I suppose we also need to return the change statement, of course. So it's going to return a statement and expers. Returns the new statement and the list of replaced scalars in order. All right. So then we can literally just say returned. Oh, no, we can't. We have to say return new statement and then something that we haven't quite figured out yet. So we'll ignore this. It's basically going to be scalar replacer dot scalars. And of course, we've got to pull this thing out into visitor, something like this. Yeah, it was a lo-fi version of Gymnopedy. You're totally right. I didn't even think of that until you mentioned it, but it's a great point. It was kind of sweet. I kind of liked it, honestly. Okay. So here we're going to have a scalars list. And basically, every time we see a datum, yeah, it is the OG lo-fi. You're totally right. We're going to say scalars. Okay, so I guess what we need to say is cur placeholder int. Yes, it is Goland, exactly. I guess this needs to be a pointer receiver. So we're going to say, you can ignore our visit post. Basically going to say v.scalars. Actually, we don't even need to cur placeholder because we have this length is the same as the cur placeholder. So we just basically say s.scalars equals append s.scalars. And then we need to grab this. We're going to pass in t. And this actually we can do one better. This can be a datums. Oops. Don't want to rename that. We just want to change its type. Okay. And then what we say is return false. And we need to make a new placeholder, right? So we need to say tree.placeholder or placeholder because we're in the tree package. What is a placeholder? A placeholder is a named placeholder. It has an index, and a placeholder IDX is a uint16. Okay, so we just need to say placeholder with IDX, placeholder IDX of len s.scalars, right? And does this start from, it's a 0 base index. So actually what we need to do here is basically just do -1, right? I guess this needs to be a address of. All right, then we recurse. It's not a date and we leave. Okay, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Now, there's one more potential thing we need to do here, which is that don't actually necessarily think this will be a datum at this point. It could also be something called like a const expr or something. Like sometimes we don't know the type of these things yet. And so it's actually going to be a constant literal expression, which may be resolved to more than one type. So it literally could be this, which is sort of trouble for us, but you know, either a numval or a strval, right? So we actually probably need to have a strval case and a numval case. Numval does not implement expr, does it not though? I guess it's like this then. In which case these are not datums at all. In fact, I think at the time of parsing, they're never going to become datums. They're always going to be strvals or numvals. So what that means is that I think this case is pointless. And I think that we need to actually make this back into exprs again. Okay. The truth, though, is that we can actually just make this one big case, right? So it's either a constant or a datum, and we can do the same thing for both of them. Great. So I think this is what we need to do. So we've replaced our scalars with placeholders. So let's go back into our test case here. and see what actually happens. I have no clue if this will actually work or not, but you know, it will definitely be interesting. Will definitely be interesting. So what we're gonna do, and of course this is, we haven't even gotten to the idea of maybe only replacing them randomly, but let's just replace them all for now. So for each of the things in parsed, we're gonna say, instead of just prep, we're gonna say, what is it called? Tree.replace scalars. Tree.replace scalars with placeholders. Pass in p.sql, p.ast. So we'll say ast comma scalars is equal to this. And instead of passing p.sql, we're going to pass in ast.string, right? And then instead of passing, I think what we need to basically do here is process the scalars. We're going to say for I in range scalars. We're going to say scalar strings is equal to, well, it's more like args is equal to make. Now, what is this? I guess it's just an interface. And then it's going to be the same length as scalars. We're going to say args of I is equal to, I literally think we might be able to just like stringify it. I think that's the only thing we can actually do, in which case these are all going to be strings, which is maybe possibly a little bit broken, but we will find out. And then at that point, we just pass them in like this. Cannot use type string as type interface. Okay, so it does actually have to be interface. We just know it ourselves that it'll be string. Okay, so try this. Let's go ahead and try to execute this. I'm sure it will completely fail, but it should be pretty interesting. So we try this just select file, and we're going to do config is equal to local prepared. See what happens. We shall see what happens. Failed to build. Well, that's a useless error message. Undefined tree.replace scalars with placeholders. Oh, is it because we have to say... Let's try now. Yuka, thank you for the raid. Sorry, I was just in the bathroom. Hope you had a great stream, Yuka. Thanks for the raid again. Welcome, everybody. My name's Jordan. I work on Go stuff, usually work on CockroachDB, which is an open source SQL distributed database on the stream. So yeah, we usually hang out, talk about database stuff, talk about Go stuff, and do a little open source programming. That is the idea of the stream. But yeah, if you guys have any questions or like talking about databases or have curiosity about database stuff, I'm always happy to talk about that stuff as well. How was your stream, Yuka? What did you all get up to on this beautiful day? Well, I'm excited to have you, Yuka. Thank you. That is nice. And thank you for the follow, by the way. Okay, so could not determine data type of placeholder. I kind of did expect that that was happening. Great and chill Friday stream. That is awesome. So basically the issue here, we always stream on Fridays as well, by the way. So our streams are always chill Friday streams. That is how we roll here at Large Data Bank. So basically the issue here is that since we were essentially just trying to replace this scalar 1 with a placeholder and pass in 1, of course it doesn't know what the expected data type is because 1 is sort of an ambiguous type scalar, which is a classic problem. You can't run, so I'll show you. If you run, in our demo, if we run prepare x as select $1, you're gonna get this error. Could not determine data type of placeholder, which is sort of, yeah, I don't know how we can get around that. Because I think this is gonna actually probably come up on a lot of different tests that we do here. Would it come up here? Let's try this one out. So we're gonna say cdemo, we're gonna say prepare x as select $1 plus, it's definitely gonna happen here, right? This is gonna fail. Could not determine data type of placeholder. So that's like fairly troublesome for this idea. So I think we're gonna have a lot of tests that are sort of ambiguous in this way. And we would have to add casts or type annotations to be able to do it. And can we do that automatically? I'm not sure. It might be fairly difficult to do it automatically. Because for example, let's say that these are, let's say we're inserting into a decimal column. We would not know, just based on this text alone, whether to add a decimal annotation or a integer annotation or a float annotation. So it's actually fairly troublesome. So we can, of course, do automatic type inference, but it requires understanding a lot more about a query than just its text. You need to know the schema that you're inserting to in this particular case, or there's all sorts of other things that you might need to know. You essentially need to understand what's in the database and not just the text of the query. So that's sort of troublesome. Sort of troublesome for us, for sure. Well, actually, maybe in this case it will work because the prepare does understand the schema of ABC, right? Yeah, so it does work in this case. I mean, one thing we could do, what's up, M. Laswick? One thing that we could do is just, if we get an error in this mode, just ignore it, basically. Not every error, but like unable to infer type error. We could just ignore all those errors because there's probably a bunch of cases where we won't get the error, and that's still valuable to know about. This is out of date. Let me update that guy. Edit project. Implementing. Yeah, it's always out of date. It's literally always out of date until somebody asks about it, and then I'll often update it. Anyway, this is basically the project. So commands, edit project. Working on an automatic. It's essentially like a metamorphic prepare with placeholders. Test variation to make sure that queries always work regardless of whether they're executed with prepare and placeholders or not. Yeah, so I guess this is going to be like that commit message will become a little bit more sophisticated if we get the second half of things done. This is already we sort of did this already. But the second mode is a little bit more interesting because it automatically finds scalar values in a query and replaces them with placeholders and then runs the prepare execute with those placeholders as well. So it is what it is, you know? Okay. You know, it'd be kind of cool. Imagine if we made a little program that every time I switch a branch, it takes the last commit message from that branch and uses that as the exclamation point project output. Or actually, I mean, maybe this actually would be something that I should work on actually, because I do feel like people often come into the stream and are sort of lost. And so maybe it'd be good to have like a history. Like you see in the bottom right, underneath my keyboard, there's this sort of blank area that I don't really use very much. And maybe down there, there should be like a history of recent commits, recent branches that I've been on, and like just kind of a little bit of extra context. That could be cool. Maybe I'll work on that at some point. It already exists. Yeah, maybe it already exists. I don't know. Probably not, but it's always possible. I mean, it's easy to make these things. You don't even need to involve the web because OBS has these plugins that just sort of read things from text files. And so as long as you make a little script that writes some stuff that you want to display into a text file, it's trivial to make OBS display it. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe one day. Yo, what's up, Portuguese captain? Yeah, the hair's getting kind of extreme, huh? The hair is definitely getting extreme. But you know, well, I've got it. I want to grow it. Well, I've got it. I want to grow it. How's that? Okay, so basically what I think I want to do, the only problem, really, is yours much longer? Does yours get down to like, are you at like butt length hair yet? I feel like a major problem with this though is that it's not like we can just be like, oh, well, if we got an error, just skip ahead and continue, because in many cases, if we skip a particular statement, the rest of the test will not execute correctly. Past your butt? Okay. We're not in competitive territory here. You're on a whole different level, man. Not gonna lie. I am unable to compete with butt hair. Completely unable to compete. That is far more powerful than anything that I have. But yeah, I don't know exactly what we should do about this though. It does present a little bit of a problem. I suppose what we could do is, maybe what we do is this. We try to do it with placeholders. If we can't do it with placeholders, specifically because of a type inference error, then we re-execute it with ordinary execute, prepare and execute. Maybe that's what we do. Want to learn Cockroach and Postgres, so think of a server in Raspberry Pi. Can it does? Yeah, so I actually do think that you can do Cockroach clusters on a cluster of Raspberry Pis. We used to have this pretty cool demo that we brought to like a conference one time, I think, where somebody installed CockroachDB onto a cluster of Raspberry Pis and then started up a workload. And then during that workload, they just like smashed one of the Raspberry Pis with a hammer to demonstrate that the database would still survive even if the Raspberry Pi was destroyed. And I think we stopped doing that demonstration, but I don't know why, because it's pretty metal. In any case, yes, you can use Raspberry Pi and CockroachDB at the same time. It might not be like the fastest database ever, but you definitely should be able to do it. Yeah, as a sample project. Yeah, that's fair. You don't have to smash them in order to make them usable. Exactly, how to demo redundancy. Like the classic way is to just pull the power plug of a particular server, right? But the metal way is to just destroy one of the computers altogether. It's kind of like when you're at a rock concert and they destroy their guitar or whatever, you know, just to show power, basically. It's basically something like that, right? So if exec error is not nil, right? So it's basically at this point where we check to see whether the prepare encounters an error or not. If it does, and if the error is related to type inference. So how are we going to figure that out? So let's try this out. Could not determine data type, right? We can sort of search for this. We can search for this. And if we see this, we're just going to try again. So let's actually try to code that up. We're going to say, basically, we're going to go like this. We're going to say, if exec error is not equal to nil, and exec error, how do we, is there like a PG error thing or a,
like you said, a human being, and I'm going to make you take that chance.
Certainly. Why, I wouldn't let her stay.
I guess you can say if exec error, PG error, exec error dot PQ dot error, PQ dot error. Okay. This. Then we can search it. Then we can compare the code. Okay, and PG error dot code is equal to PG error dot. How do I do this? An error code is what? It's a string. Okay. (42p18). 42p18 is an indeterminate data type error, right? So indeterminate data type. PG error dot indeterminate PG code indeterminate data type dot string. I guess we just stringify it, basically. Errors.is. Oh yeah, what does errors.is do again? I never really remember how this thing works. So I think the only issue is that it might not always be the same. Like, we need to compare this code thing. I don't know. So basically, we're going to say sometimes it's impossible to prepare, execute a query with scalars replaced as placeholders because there is insufficient information in the text of the query to infer which types the placeholders should be coerced, should be basically. Placeholder should be. In this case, we'll just fall back on an ordinary prepare execute without placeholders. So in this case, we're just going to say prep exec error is equal to t.db.prepare. We're going to redo it with p.ast, no, p.query, p.sql. And then we're going to say scalars, we're going to say args is equal to empty, basically. Okay, so then we can continue along. And this can come up here. All right. So let's go ahead and try to run this. See what happens. Also, what's up, Mateus? Okay, could not parse hello as type bool, but actually got error in argument for $1, parsing hello invalid syntax. Interesting. Interesting. So I think this is good, but it does... It's kind of highlighting that sometimes our error messages are slightly different depending on whether we are doing it in prepared mode or not. Expected could not parse hello as type bool. Found error in argument for $1, parsing hello invalid syntax. I mean, what's actually quite interesting here is that I believe that this is probably not even getting the right error code back, right? It's probably just getting an internal error, which is not great. Where does this come from? Error in argument 4. Error in argument 4. It's actually here. Yeah. Huh. So this is actually quite interesting. I think this is an interesting issue either way. Yeah, you see, these are more correct, I would say. Could not parse whatever as whatever. Could not parse whatever as whatever. Yeah. Look at that. We have them all done nicely, except for bool, actually. So I actually think this found a real bug, you guys. Isn't that kind of cool? I feel like that's fairly cool. So we really want to say, if error is not equal to nil, we want to say, not just return the error, we want to say something more specific. pgerror.newf, newf, pgcode.syntax, could not parse. Largest switch statement you've ever seen? It's not that large. I've seen bigger. I've seen bigger. Type switches, man. It's very common that you have a giant type switch. Could not parse. Q as type bool, basically. And I think these should all say that. Not could not parse string blah as. They should all say could not parse blah as type blah, right? Could not parse Q as type. You see this? Valid text representation. I feel like we should just fix all these at once, right? Could not parse Q as type blah. We're going to replace this with, it's rather could not parse string Q as, right? They're all going to be replaced with could not parse Q as. And then the same thing, I guess we could have done a little bit better. We want to do could not parse Q as, this wants to be could not parse Q as type. But not this one. But we can, let's see. So we can actually do, we can exclude them. So we just want to be, let's see, open and find window. So we're going to delete, we only want to do this file, and we don't want to do this one or this one because they're both already done. Keep these ones, keep this one, delete this one, delete this one, delete this one. Okay, replace all. No, I want to only do the ones that I asked for. What the heck? What if I just say replace? The heck? Okay, this is not working as expected. Not working as expected. Let's see what I just did by accident. Okay, we'll just do it. How do I just ask it to do it only in this file? I guess it's up here. Okay, so could not parse Q as. Could not parse Q as type. Okay. Oh God. Okay. 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 Great. Let's rerun our test. Probably want to make a separate commit for that, but expected could not parse hello as type bool. Actually found could not parse blah as type bool. Missing. Okay. Oops. Definitely need to fix that. The Q is going to be the string of B. And we actually need to make a similar thing here. T.parse D bit array, I believe, may have the same problem. But definitely parse int will, because we're not using our own thing. Could not parse Q as type. I think we need to, yeah, we just need to do the same thing. And in fact, why don't we just make a new, do we have a function for this called like, could not parse Q as type Q, type S. Like, why don't we use make parse error for this? Right? Seems like we've got something for this. Maybe we don't have oh, we do. We literally do. Okay, we should do this refactor. And try not to be too lazy about it. Var is not equal to nil. We're gonna say return nil. Tree.make parse error. We literally have a thing for this, dude. String of B. Now, I suppose we could pass along our error. Why not? Now, isn't that elegant? I feel like that's much more elegant. And then we can literally just do exactly the same thing every time, which is significantly better than what we had before. Isn't that just fantastic? They can all be the same. They can all be exactly the same. And it does make me feel like maybe we ought to clean things up even further and just return this once at the end, but you know, that's too gross. There's no need to do that. I think that'll just make everybody a little bit more confused. So we're just gonna carefully replace all of these, and then we'll have done a good service. We've done a good service for people. Like, if you have a function, you should use it. That's what I'm trying to say here. All right? If you have a function, you should use it. Okay. Now, there's of course an entire other section of stuff which is in the binary format, which I'm going to ignore for the time being. So let's move on and see what happens. Expected, cannot parse hello as type bool. Found, cannot parse a weirdly quoted hello as type bool. Oh, now I believe there's a new problem, which is that my test harness is now the thing that's broken, I think. So if I go back, Yeah. So what I need to do is basically when we form these arguments, instead of just running string on these scalars, I think I actually need to run like format. It's like isn't there like some sort of format string business? What is it called again? It was like tree.format node. You got a Facebook offer? Congratulations, Microbic. That's awesome. Are you gonna take it? Also, wait, isn't it called Meta now? Come on, dude. You're a meta guy now. Or gal. Or NB. You're a meta mate. Oh man, that's good stuff. Tree.asString. There we go. Except I think that's not going to quite work either. We need to say... Your second choice? Ooh, tough. Tough but fair. Tough but fair. Scalars I dot format. I think we need to maybe pass a new format context tree dot. New format context. And we need to use format. It's like it like dequotes everything. How do we do that again? Bare strings. Format bare strings. Format bare strings. So we'll grab this, put it over here. Do we hire juniors? Yeah. We definitely hire lots of new grads. In fact, I know someone who's joining Cockroach, whose first choice was Cockroach and whose second choice was Meta. So there you go. Everyone's different in this world. Everyone is different. As string with flags. That's the thing. Tree.format bare strings. Okay. So then we're going to go ahead and say args of I is equal to like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and try again. So, cannot parse null as type bool. Parsing null invalid syntax. Now that is very interesting. Select from ABC where null. Huh. Now what is that about? Let's go ahead and do a little demo here. So if we open our demo, prepare X as select star from A where null, or $1. Create table A int. Then we go ahead and say execute X of true. Fine, but what about execute X of null? That does work. Now, what does that mean is a question. What does that mean? That's very strange. It's very strange. Could not parse null as type bool. Well, if you did apply and you didn't get an offer, I recommend applying again one day. We're definitely still growing, so if you end up getting tired of working at Meta, you should apply again. Definitely goes for any of you watching. This is not a recruiting stream, but if you are interested in working at the company Cockroach Labs, you should go to our website and apply. Send me a DM too if you do it. I can't really do too much to help, but I can definitely put a note that says I met this person on Twitch. If that does a positive thing or a negative thing, I couldn't tell you, but I can do it. I can do it. Could not parse null as type bool. Oh, I guess I know what it is. Yeah, there's also the troubleness of different countries, and we definitely don't do the best job of dealing with that right now. In fact, I think it's gotten kind of harder to get a job at Cockroach Labs than it used to be if you live in a non-approved country or whatever. We have like a few countries that we hire from, but I feel like it's gotten more difficult because, you know, we've sort of grown up, I think is the story of Cockroach. We were once a tiny startup that was kind of just trying to get people however we could, so to speak. And now we have like a legal department, you know, and we're getting fairly corporate, I would say. Not necessarily in a bad way, but definitely just like we're definitely growing up. You know, we've gotten a lot of funding, for example. And once you have a lot of funding, and once you want to try to, you know, maybe try to become a public company one day or succeed, you sort of do start to button up a little bit. And sometimes that does mean doing things like needing to have an official office in a country if you want to hire in that country. It does become quite a bit more difficult. Quite a bit more difficult. So I guess the issue here is that if you are a Go client and you try to pass a string that says null, I guess you're going to have a bad time, right? Maybe you need to pass something that's like SQL, like go SQL.null. Yeah. Ooh. There's a whole gross thing. Null bool. Actually, let's see. So go SQL database. Go database SQL null repaired statement. How do you pass a null? You actually do have to use null string. And that's really quite tough for us because we don't even know. I'm confused. I'm quite confused. Hold on a minute. So for example, in this test case, what is this test case again? Which number is it? It's number, oh crap. Okay. Get rid of this. Cannot parse null as type bool, and it's line 54 of the test, okay? So 54. And we see this. And we pass. Now I'm quite a bit confused, I gotta say. So I guess what's going on here is that we have something called dnull. And in the case of dnull, we should not be just passing back the string. I guess that's the issue, right? I guess maybe we just skip nulls for now. I don't know. I'll do that for now, just because I don't think it really works properly. So we're going to say case dnull. If it's a dnull, return false expr. Don't try to substitute null with placeholders because Go's database SQL needs to know the type of the null in order to send it properly. Actually, I wonder if that's even true. Let's actually do a quick check here. Before we do that, we'll leave this, but we'll just comment it out. Before we do that, I'm actually very curious if I go over here, and when I actually add together these arguments, so if I see if scalars of I equals tree.d null, then we're going to say args of I is equal to go SQL dot null string, basically, just like a random null. And then otherwise we go like this. And perhaps this will actually work okay. So let's go ahead and find out. Okay, so argument of limit must be type int, not type decimal. Okay, that's great. So it did actually work. So error in argument for $1 cannot parse 3.3 as type int. Okay, so this is actually, we've done some good stuff. Okay, see you later, M. Laswick. I'll see you maybe later, maybe not. Maybe later, maybe not. So cannot parse 3.3 at type int. Parsing blah, invalid syntax. Argument of limit must be type int, not type decimal. Yeah. No, definitely. Facebook's definitely a great name to have on the CV. I do think that people, we have a pretty good employer brand in the sense that if somebody sees that you've worked at Cockroach Labs, they're going to be definitely impressed just because of what you're saying, which is that everyone knows that it's challenging to build a database. Yeah, now this is a little bit challenging though, you know. Definitely, I think you would be. Argument must be of type int, not type decimal. Yeah, that's tricky. Definitely tricky stuff. Must be type int, not type blah. Data type mismatch. It's tricky. These typing errors, they can be different depending on if it's prepare or execute. That's what I'm learning. I don't, it's a bit difficult to deal with, honestly. Just out of curiosity, I'm gonna try it different. different test file. I'm wondering how ubiquitous it is to get an error like that. Because depending on how common it is to see these sort of silly type mismatch error messages being different across prepare and execute, maybe there's a few different ways to solve this problem. Is that even a test file? Did I just run a test file that doesn't actually exist? That would possibly help explain why it just sort of seamlessly worked. Let's try distinct. So that actually seems to be working. What about tuple? Ooh, that's kind of an interesting. Cannot determine data type of placeholder. I thought we have an exception for this though. Why is that not 22023? The different invalid parameter value. Whereas we were expecting indeterminate data type. That is annoying. definitely a bit annoying. Unsupported comparison operator. This is a little fiddly. Yeah, you see this invalid parameter value. I mean, I guess that's fair. Or is it fair? You know, it doesn't really seem that fair to me, actually. Like, this has the right error code. Maybe it would be better to simply search for this string, could not determine data type of placeholder. That might be kind of a better thing,
because they use
rather than checking these error codes because they're different apparently.
And write to disk.
Yo, Dom, thank you for the 7 months. Appreciate it. And hello. How you doing? Sup? Sup.
Everybody knows that relational databases don't scale because
Oh,
they
man.
use joins, and write to disk.
Microbic, thank you for the brand new tier 1 sub. Appreciate it. Thank you. Enjoy the very illustrious and exciting library of gopher dancing emotes like this one. But thank you, really appreciate it. So what do we do about this though? we just give up, or do we just search for this? Yeah, well, I did rip it, but I also checked to see what the copyright was, and the copyright is 0 copyright. So I think it's fair. It says it's public domain, I guess. Never wrote an interface. I think it is egg on art, yeah. I think the little animation, somebody else made it, but they released it under the same license. So I don't feel too bad about it, right? I shouldn't feel bad about it if it's literally public domain, I hope. So why don't we go ahead and we're just gonna search for this string. So we're gonna write a comment about it. Let's put this up over here. Ooh, that is a good little Kiri dance. I like that. Unfortunately, there's not a consistent error code returned for this situation. Sometimes it's indeterminate data type, which is probably most correct. But sometimes the indeterminate data type error is wrapped by a different function and given a slightly different error code. As a result, we choose to check the string error rather than, oh, I suppose I could be unwrapping. No, I can't unwrap it, unfortunately, because the PQ error just stringifies everything. Going through all this SQL query optimization, and I'm more surprised that databases work at all. Hip hop VM. I thought they'd change that to be something. Isn't that called hack now or something? So we're going to say if exec error dot error strings that contains exec error. We're going to search for could not determine data type of placeholder. Okay, we try again. I think when people say optimizing compiler, it's pretty much equivalent to just saying compiler. I think compilers in general they always contain some level of optimization. And it's the same with SQL. What about the Python compiler? Well, I guess we would call the Python, I guess I don't know how Python compiler works. I mostly think of Python as an interpreted language and not a compiled language. Expected success, but found non-integer constant in order by. That is definitely true. So if I run select one order by one, non-integer constant in order by. Now, why is that happening though? Non-integer constant in order by. Ooh, can you not prepare X as select one order by one? That works fine. But if I say prepare Y as select one order by $1, ooh, Ooh, non-integer constant in order by, huh? So I'm not allowed to do a placeholder in an order by. Does Postgres allow me to do that? Prepare y as select one order by $1. That does work fine. Execute y of 3. Non-integer constant in order by. Now, I believe that order by has a very weird semantic when you pass it in an integer, actually. Because it has to do with this stuff. Do databases use bytecode for compiled queries? Or maybe it's dwarfed by the I/O or just tree walking. So it depends on the database system. Some databases do use a VM, but not all do. I think there's kind of a split between databases that use, well, there's kind of 3 types of databases, I'd say. There's sort of databases that are more similar to an interpreter in the sense that they make a query plan that is kind of a big tree of operations and walk the tree and do that in a big loop, right? A database is essentially running a little program for every row in its input. And the question is like, yeah, what do you do? What is that program written in? Sometimes it's sort of just the code and it's row by row. And that's what we call, I guess, more similar to an interpreted mode. Sometimes we have this just-in-time compiled mode, like SQLite does, or some other more advanced data systems like Hyper. So there's this database called Hyper, which is this really elite, fast, just-in-time compiled database system that everyone thinks is really impressive. And then on the other end, we have what Cockroach does and some other databases do, like I think Snowflake does this and MonadDB does this, which is called vectorization, which is where instead of writing it's not just-in-time compiled into a bytecode and sent to a VM, but it is kind of interpreted using a tree of operators that are type specific, so generated at compile time of the database. You generate all of the different operators for all of the different possible types, and they're very specific. So, for example, you might have a add integer to integer column operator, and then you would sort of compile that operator into the tree of operators that are being executed for the program. And what's special about this is that instead of just operating over a single integer and a single variable integer, which is sort of what the interpreted model would be doing, it's operating over a whole vector of those things. So it's kind of a batch methodology that the industry calls vectorization. Although it's different from like processor vectorization, like running with the SIMD instructions in processors or whatever. It's not the same thing, but the model can be used with SIMD. It's just not, the technique is a little bit different than just SIMD. Yes, exactly. So there is a good lesson about it, and there's also, not only that, there's also a really good paper called JIT versus vectorization databases. This guy. This is the paper. You can definitely welcome to share the channel wherever. I don't know if I'm going to go self-advertising under random undergraduate subreddits, but you're definitely welcome to share it if you feel like that would be exciting for you. Yeah. So that's the idea. That is the idea. So right, I think that this thing is sort of weird, and I wonder if we just deliberately don't do it because we're lazy or what? I'm guessing that we deliberately don't do it because we're lazy. Random people. Random people becoming tech people. So this expert. I wonder if we have an issue open for this, actually. Seems like we don't. I'll make a new issue for this. So we're going to say SQL support placeholders in order by. The order by clause accepts an integer argument. Actually, you know what's actually sort of odd? Yeah, that doesn't work. Okay, so non-integer constant in order by is a good thing. But anyway, so the order by clause accepts an expression as an argument. The expression can either be an integer, in which case it's interpreted as a column ordinal in the select clause and orders the results by that column, or a column name. Or I guess it's or an expression involving a column reference, in which case it's interpreted as ordering the results by the output of that expression. In the former case, in the column ordinal case, we should really accept. And actually, here's another question. Let's go ahead and try something like this. So prepare X as select one. Well, let's do create table A int. Prepare X as select star from a order by A plus 1. Execute X. Oh, right. We already knew that was going to work. What we needed to do is like this. So that also works fine. So I can say execute Y of 3, and that works actually fine. Okay. Since the column ordinal case I guess it's like support placeholder column ordinals in order by. We should accept a placeholder for the former case. This is permitted by Postgres. In this case, the placeholder will be an integer. Placeholder must be filled in with an integer and becomes a column ordinal. Just like if we passed a constant integer. For example, prepare X as select one order by $1. This should be a preparable statement. This should not error. Big company versus small company. So I've never worked at a big company myself. My career history is basically that I worked at a tiny startup. I worked at 2 tiny startups during college as an intern. I graduated college and then I worked at a medium-sized startup that got up to about 300 people for 5 years or so. That was an education technology company called Newton. And then I joined Cockroach Labs, which was only like 20 people when I joined, and now it's 400. So we've definitely gotten, medium size, but 400 is definitely not a big company size. Definitely not even close, right? So I would say I think that given my limited experience, I do like working at small companies quite a bit. I feel like you can have a lot more impact. You can make your role more custom to what you want to be doing, I think. Like if you get excited about something in particular and you make a lot of noise about it, and not just make noise about it, but actually sort of do it, right? And kind of show that you're putting effort into this thing. It's very common that you can actually run with that thing and end up working on it if you want to. Whereas I think at a big company, it's quite a bit more rigid and more difficult to do what you want, so to speak. So that's, I don't know, it's my general take. I think another thing is often you can learn more about, you can kind of take more diverse paths with your career at a small company, I think. Because there's just more opportunity at a small company, right? There's so many things that have to be done at a small company, and most of them are just not being done. So if you want to do that thing, you can often change your role to do it. And for example, I started in management at Cockroach, and I think at a big company, I probably never would have done that. And obviously, you can have mixed feelings about whether you're interested in doing management or not. But for me personally, I really enjoy engineering management, and I've enjoyed this kind of different part of the tech world that I've been doing for the last 3-4 years now. And I really don't think that I ever would have had the opportunity to try it at a big company, because nobody would have said, hey, we kind of need this, and I wouldn't have thought, like, maybe I'll volunteer, maybe I'll try out eng management. I never would have thought that, because there's probably enough, right, at a big company. There's probably already people there who are career managers, and you probably just don't need to do that. So I would have stayed as an engineer, which, maybe for you that's good. For me, it would have been fine too. I love engineering just on its own. But I feel like I've learned quite a bit as a manager. And I think that kind of lesson, I think, will hold probably pretty frequently at big versus small, right? You'll just get opportunities to try things that you weren't expecting more at a small company, I think. Experience as an intern. I would say that when I was in college, this was in I think 2009 and 2010 that I did these internships. I would say the internships were fine. They were both at tiny companies, and I guess I learned a bunch, but I don't know, it felt really random and it wasn't particularly structured. I look at the internship programs that we have at my company. It's wow, we do so much more for these interns now. We give them clear projects. There's, they have helpful resources. There's onboarding. There's people to help them on their way and ask them to do presentations at the end and stuff like that. And when I was doing this stuff, there was none of that. And it was just sort of go work at random stuff. Big companies have more layers of management that could ruin your day. Bunch of stupid people joining Cockroach and killing it. Are you talking about? I don't think that that's actually proven microbic. I think you're talking about the old adage, A's hire A's and B's hire C's. But that's kind of this apocryphal thing that is not. I think it's kind of just something that it's a meme that goes around. But I don't think that that's the root cause of what you're looking at. You know what I mean? I think as companies grow bigger, the type of people who join changes, but it isn't about dumber and smarter. And it would probably do you good to take that kind of thing out of your thinking. That will definitely not help you too much throughout your career to think about people hiring dumber or smarter people or anything like that. Been at your company 4 months and they've yet to give you access to the servers you need to do your jobs. There's a classic big co kind of thing. Got to get those permissions up and running. Okay, so given that, let's try another random file at random to see if we can find more issues. So far, we haven't found anything particularly interesting, to be honest, but that's okay. We're just kind of exploring whether this is going to be a good idea for a test. I think it's definitely a good idea for a test. The question is just like, can we make it happen or not? I don't really know. What about the limit test or the ORMS test? Should be interesting. Capable, not smart. I think that the biggest effect here is it's really that like the things that you need at a company vastly change as the company grows. When you're small, you really need a lot of self-starters. And when you're bigger, people don't need to have that same amount of self-startingness necessarily. And in fact, it might be kind of wasted. If you kind of join and you're a real self-starter, you're really interested in doing everything yourself, and you join a big company, you're not gonna have a good time because there's not gonna be space for you to be innovative and creative. And so you'll kind of just be uninterested in being there. Whereas you can, if you feel like you want to come to work and do a job and go home and, you know, execute on a roadmap that's clear, I think that big companies often need that sort of thing a lot more.
I have to narrow down the search.
And I think from a naive perspective, it might look like a person who's doing that is not as capable. But that would be sort of false. And I think that kind of false dichotomy is sometimes what drives some of these conversations where people are like, oh man, the people here are getting worse, you know. I think it's just the culture at a company changes over time as it grows. Has Cockroach been approached by a hyper cloud provider to make it into a managed layer on top of their managed databases? I don't know what that really means, to be honest, Virogenesis. I actually don't know what that means. But you can get CockroachDB from the marketplaces of a bunch of these different clouds. Is that what you mean? Probably not. That's not what you mean. I don't really know what you mean. Hello, Sophia. It's about passion. I think, yeah. So that's another thing where it's like using the word passion it can be a very mixed bag because it's quite hard to define really what that means. And I think early in my career, I was very interested in like, yeah, obviously you need to get the passionate people to come join your project. And I think that's sort of true, but it's also sort of like, it can be limiting because I think especially in the world of like companies that are like paying people a lot of money, people are not going to try to join a company and be passionate, right? People want to be paid. That's kind of like what it comes down to. And so like people want to join a place that will pay them properly, especially as they grow or get older or the company's bigger. And then passion sort of like sometimes leaves the equation at that point because people are really interested in joining a talent marketplace and being compensated at market value. And then passion, it's like, why would I need to be passionate? I have a job. I can perform at this level. I need to be compensated for it. What's there to do with passion? It's a subtle thing, especially as a manager. I need to stay away from using language like that because everybody is motivated differently. And passion is not really necessarily a good benchmark for how well somebody can execute. But it's tough because for me personally, I also feel I love programming in many ways. I do this stream, for example. It's because I really enjoy programming and I feel passionate about it to some extent. And you know, love lasts 3 years, but I've been doing programming for, you know, basically like 15 years or so, I guess. And so I guess I would say that I do feel that passion and excitement, but it just isn't like that for everybody necessarily. In GCP, you can create a managed database instance like Postgres MySQL. I wonder if you see Cockroach as one of those managed and one as a layer over their database offers. What I don't understand is what you mean by layer over, because we definitely are able to create a managed CockroachDB instance on GCP, which that actually delegates to Cockroach Cloud, I believe. Cockroach Cloud is our managed offering. But I guess I don't understand what you mean as a layer over their other database offerings. I don't quite get that. Cloud SQL is a very generic database platform that can be either Postgres or MySQL. But I think the equivalent would be like you could get a Cloud SQL instance that was CockroachDB underneath. It wouldn't be CockroachDB on top of Postgres or MySQL. It would be the other way around. But I doubt that that's a thing that people will be interested in on the Google side. I don't know why they would want to do that. And I think also it's trickier because Cockroach is a much more sophisticated distributed system than Postgres or MySQL. I think I don't know. Basically, I don't know. I need to think about it a little bit more, but no, CockroachDB is not a proxy. CockroachDB is a standalone distributed SQL database that doesn't proxy to anything. Yes, I completely agree with you, Dom. That's a very concise way of phrasing it, and I agree with it. So basically, if I could rephrase what you're saying that if you are a person who happens to feel passionate about engineering in a particular way, it can be really frustrating to join a big company because often you don't get to follow that passion. I agree, completely agree. I think that's a big part of why I like to recommend to young people to think about joining startups, because again, you just get that, you really get to follow your interests. You get to, kind of feel that excitement, and often you get to kind of follow that excitement wherever it leads you, as opposed to like, oh, well, I've got this roadmap stuff and I've got to execute just like this, and I'm feeling excited about this other thing, but I can't really look at it. That's definitely a big risk at bigger companies, I think. And just since we were talking about Cockroach or whatever, like, not saying that we're perfect, but I think one thing that's nice is that we've got this Flex Friday and Breather Week stuff. I sometimes tweet about it. So every Friday, people are given the flexibility to go, work on those passions or work on those interesting side things or things that they're, follow their interests. And we have a quarterly week where we do the same thing for an entire week. So I don't know. I think that are things that you can do at a big company or a bigger medium-sized company to like help people follow those interests. But it is more likely, I think, the bigger the company gets, that you don't have that flexibility. Yeah. So, actually, I've got a question. My question is, I was going to say, can I make this a test file? But I cannot, because this is a production file, unfortunately. Well, that's okay. This is not very much code, so it's all right. I'm going to rename this file to not be testing, though, because it just sounds a little awkward. So we'll call it replace scalars. Okay. So we're going to add 2, 3. Well, I think we're just going to add 2. And then we're going to add 4 and 5. And then this 4 is actually a bug fix. So we're going to make it separately. Good words about engineering culture can't be easily shared towards some other startups. Yeah, that's probably true. I obviously, my experience is super limited to the places that I've worked at. But Stripe, Stripe a startup though? Stripe probably has, you know, thousands and thousands of people, doesn't it? I think at a certain point you stop to really be a startup. And Stripe company size. They've got 4,000 people. I mean, it's arguable that it's like, yeah, pre-IPO. Is Stripe IPO? Stripe IPO? Okay, they're still pre-IPO. I think I'm just gonna make a new commit for this called SQL. Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna call this like SQL. Let's actually logic test. Randomly replace scalars with placeholders. This commit enhances the local prepared logic test configuration to replace scalars with placeholders and execute the queries with placeholders and execute the queries with the scalars as arguments to the prepared statement. I guess execute the queries as prepared statements with the scalars as arguments. As an engineering manager, how much coding do you do other days of the week? Basically 0. So it's even worse than I'm just an engineering manager. I'm a director of engineering, which means that managers report to me. And what this means is that my job has basically nothing to do with programming myself these days. A big part of why I do the stream is actually just to stay connected to programming myself and remember what the, you know, just I like programming and I like understanding the code base and stuff like that. So this is kind of my outlet for programming stuff these days. What is GS for? Okay, so GS is just get status, but what you're looking for is this get number thing, which lots of people on the stream ask about because it's so freaking cool. It's a big, big help to add this script because you don't have to, use the whole name of the thing anymore. And it's basically just a little script that wraps all of the get commands and gives you, it outputs the numbers for get status and for get add and get rm and all of the other things like that. It uses this little substitution thing to replace the integers with the file names, basically. Okay. So it's called get number. Do you not, in the chat, you should see a link to it. Does that not work? It does. Looks like my music has run out here. Has it run out? No, it hasn't. Okay. So we've got this commit. So let's go ahead and just push this up to see what tests fail. And in the meantime, we're going to go to another branch. We're going to make a branch called like fix parse error messages. So we're going to say commit PG Wirebase emit better errors for better parse errors. Previously, pgwire emitted subtly different error messages for parse errors, like e.g. when trying to interpret a string argument to something as a bool or float, etc. Then the non-pgwire path. This is corrected by using a pre-existing, I guess we could call it it's basically like using the pre-existing parse error function from the tree package that the rest of the code that the other path uses. Error messages returned when the error messages returned when encountering a malformed data type, malformed argument, or I guess it's like return when encountering a malformed argument for a query in the wire protocol are now more consistent with other error messages, basically, with similar error messages. Basically just more consistent. I don't know. This doesn't need to be too perfect. Okay. So we'll make a little PR for this. All right. I feel like we've hit a pretty good stopping point. You know, we did some relatively effective stuff. So I think I'm gonna probably call it a day. I'm gonna go ahead and find someone to raid. I hope you guys all have a good weekend, by the way. Has anybody got any good plans coming up? Anything exciting happening? Apparently not. Dissertation? That's exciting. Oh, I suppose it just means that you're continuing to work on your dissertation, not that you're defending it. What are you getting your PhD in? Bachelor's, okay. I didn't know that people called that a dissertation. I thought that usually you use the word dissertation for PhD. I see. I feel like people often say bachelor's thesis, no? Right? I don't know. So let's see. Who are we going to raid here? Who are we going to raid? We could go ahead and maybe raid. Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining and chatting so much. Definitely appreciate it. I've never rated this person. This person seems like they could be fun. So let's go ahead and give this person a raid. Well, have a good weekend, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your time. I certainly did. It was nice hanging out, nice chatting. I'll be back next week. I stream every Friday at 3 p.m. ET. Please join our Discord. Please follow me on Twitter. Those are your calls to action for this week. Alrighty. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.